Hello. Welcome to the 20th part of the Necromancer's evolutionary traits. A special thanks to my channel members for supporting me. And if you want to support, you can join my channel membership or Patreon for as low as $1. Thank you very much. Let's begin. At the beginning of this part, we see that Andrea says, it would be a crime to let a talent as good as yours go to waste. Get yourself admitted to the academy. I'll write you a letter of recommendation. Ben says, but I don't have the money. Andrea says, when I say I'll recommend you, that also means I'll sponsor you. All you have to do is decide whether to take it or not. Andrea says, I have enough resources to do that. Ben starts to cry and says, someday, I'll definitely return your kindness. After that, we see Andrea's is sitting and reading messages. He thinks, looks like he got admitted to Manhwa's Academy. Ben sends him a message saying, thank you so much for the letter of commendation and also your support. Your Excellency has great swordsmanship, and I aspire to be strong as Your Excellency. Andreas thinks he's a sword specialist, so he'll have no problem graduating. Work hard, Benjamin. I'll provide you with as much money as you want. Now then, I should get ready to go to Muriel's auction. Andreas messages Carlos saying, Carlos, you see, I'd like to participate in the Muriel auction. Carlos says, oh, is there something you want there? Leave the entry tickets to me. My father will find a way to get me one. Andreas says, thank you very much. Let's meet up at the auction tomorrow. Andreas thinks, nice to have a great noble acquaintance. He says, all right, time to go. To Deadly Sin's most lawless entertainment district. What became of the demon sword Rubens? Acolytes member says to Jester that the boy fled with the sword, and we've sent a unit after him, but they still haven't returned. Jester says, are you saying you let him get away? He thinks, it's a demon sword that amplifies its holder's magic ability and physical ability. I was planning to study it and create a mass-producible demon sword. It was the material I was searching for to strengthen the army. I thought I'd finally found it, but to think it slipped away like this. He is really angry and says, send Hosen to Muriel. Get him to join the Aleb at the auction. He thinks, I must get the crown of the deep at all costs. If he's there, even if something unexpected happens, he'll bring it back. After that, we see at Port Town Muriel, the largest auction of its entertainment district, Night of Flowing Gold. Andreas thinks, my aim is the Deadly Sins, but let's take this opportunity to get as many named items as possible. It's the White Nightmare, a renowned sword with a high mana conductivity. All right, if I win this bid, I'll send it to Benjamin. Carlos says, so, it's true that you're interested in swordsmanship? Andreas says, oh, I was thinking of giving this to someone I know. Carlos says, it looks pretty good, but 20 million wills is a bit low, don't you think? Raise it to 50 million. Andreas thinks, why brother when you can get it cheaper? Andreas says, it's just started, so the price will go up gradually. Auctioneer says, 23 million. 23 million is in. Anyone else? Auctioneer says, thank you very much. The White Nightmare, sold for 23 million wills. Carlos says, Andreas thinks, seems like 20 million would have been just fine. Auctioneer says, now, on to the next item. This is a map that many scholars have tried to decipher, but the code has proved too difficult for them. Andreas thinks, that thing's here too? The secret map that leads to the location of the dragon tomb of the red dragon, Krabmaha. I thought it was just an Easter egg. I didn't expect it to actually exist. Corpses are assets to me. I have to get them. Auctioneer says, now then let's start with 2 million wills. 5 million. 5 million just in. Anybody else? If I can get my hands on a dragon, I'll be as strong as the whole country. Encrypted map, sold for 5 million wills. Andreas gets excited and says, all right. Someone sees them and thinks, who the hell are they? Seems like they're loaded with money. No matter. Have fun with that. The main prize is the crown, anyway. The more money you spend before that, the less competition for me. Auctioneer says, well then, on to the next item. A rechargeable portal scroll that allows you to move anywhere, anytime. Up to 2 uses per day. Andreas buys that as well. Auctioneer says, ancient alchemist's antique alchemical tool. Practical and stylish. Andreas buys that as well. Carlos is surprised and thinks, is he even thinking about what he's buying? Auctioneer says, and now, the long-awaited final item. Hold your breath. It's a relic salvaged from the bottom of the deep sea. I present to you, Lords of the Seas. System says, the purest original sin has detected the power of benevolent greed. Andreas thinks, there it is. Auctioneer says, the starting price is 1 billion wills, and the bidding units are 10 million wills. Andreas thinks, that's a steep price. If only I had the earnings from next month's potion sale. Carlos sees him and says, you want that too? Andreas says, well, I'll try a few bids, but if it's hopeless, I'll just give up. Carlos says, I'll buy it for you. Andreas says, why are you? Carlos says, Father told me the gist of the story. He told me that the reason you were injured in the sewers was because you were trying to save us. Andreas says, that was. Things just happened. Carlos says, let me show you the wealth of the Alvin house. That man is really surprised and thinks, what? Do they still have money left? I'll shut those little brats up with Master's wealth. He is one of Jester's men. They put 1.5 billion, then 2 billion, 3 billion, 7 billion, 8.7 billion, 10 billion. Auctioneer is really excited and says, we've reached 10 billion. Carlos also gets excited and says, things are getting interesting. Andreas sees him and thinks, as competitive as ever. Now that we're in this citation, you better win, and I'll make sure to pay you back. Auctioneer is really excited and says, unbelievable, the bid has reached 50 billion wills. Is there anyone else bidding? Carlos puts 70 billion. Then Aleb puts in 90 billion. Bid reaches 100 billion wills. Aleb thinks, should I go further? He thinks of Jester, says, make sure you win the bid, no matter how high it is. Aleb thinks, no matter how much wealth the master has, this is just too much. I should have asked how much I was allowed to spend. There, no time to ask the master. Auctioneer says, thank you very much, Lords of the Seas. Sold for 100 billion wills. He says, Sir Hosen? Hosen says, I bet Master sent me here because you, being the coward that you are, would have screwed it up. Even if you had succeeded in winning the bidding with over 100 billion, you would have been killed for it. Go back and wait. I don't know who they are. Let them enjoy the taste of victory before they die. Carlos says, I guess I'm gonna get a scolding when I get back. I'm starving. Let's go out and get something to eat. Andreas thinks, the wealth of the Alvin house. You've shown me very well. After that, we see Andreas is wearing the crown and Carlos is laughing really hard and says, that looks very good on you, Your Highness Andreas. Andreas thinks, treating the codex like a toy. I guess that's his privilege since he bought it. Anyway, let's have a toast to celebrate. Andreas says, thank you as always, Carlos. Andreas thinks, thank to him. I've managed to get greed safely, and it seems the congregation hasn't made a move yet, since it seems we can walk away with it now. Hey, who are you people? You aren't allowed here. Hosen gets there and says, whoops, did I interrupt your dinner time? Carlos says, who are you? Andreas thinks, speaks of the devil. Hosen says, give me the crown and stop back, and I'll kill you without any pain. Now this is troublesome. Of all people, it's Jester's dog, Hosen the Devil Sword. Although he can't use secret arts yet, he's still an aura master. Arrogant of his own talent, he constantly clashes with his mentor, D. Scrun. Eventually, he parted ways with him and fell into the criminal underworld. He was then recruited by Jester, who saw his talent. Here I thought I could safely retrieve greed and get away with. Things look bad here. Let's run. Hosen says, I won't let you. Get them. They attack them. Carlos and Andreas jump out of the window and run away. Hosen says, good. Don't make it too easy for me, or I'll get bored. It's hunting time. Andreas and Carlos reach a river. Carlos says, great. They won't be able to catch up with us if we cross the river. Muriel is a lawless area beyond the reach of the Empire's power, but once we get out of here, those guys are nothing. Andiris says, you go on first and call for help, Carlos. Carlos says, what are you saying? Andreas says, those guys aren't something we can outrun easily. It's too dangerous for us to move together. And it's easier for me to escape if I'm alone. So, good grief. Blockhead as always. I understand. I'll try to bring help to you as fast as I can. Thanks. I'll see you later. Carlos leaves. Andreas thinks, well then, with Carlos safely away, they appear there and say, found him. It's time for me to go all out. They say, where's the other guy? The crown is probably with this guy. Andreas says, sure, come and take it. If you can, that is. They says, how dare you mock us? They attack him and says, we'll shred you to pieces. Andreas starts to kill them. He thinks, Rudradal. Hosen thinks, a summoning spell. Is it undead? A really big arm appears. They say, what's that big arm? Andreas appears behind one of them. He stabs him in the back and says, try not to get distracted. Andreas keeps on killing them. Hosen sees that and gets excited. He thinks, not only is he skilled in black magic, he is even skilled with the sword. What an interesting boy. On top of that, that's swordsmanship. Hosen attacked him. Andreas blocks the attacks. Hosen says, I wonder who you really are? Andreas says, who knows, try guessing. Hosen kicks him and says, cheeky brat. That sword. Feels like I saw it in a book somewhere. A named sword like that is wasted on you. Looks like Hosen is stronger than Pyatt. I might be able to win if I use sloth here, but the aftermath would be a problem. Hosen says, all right, I'll add that sword of yours to one of my collections, too. Andreas says, collections? What a pretentious thief. Andreas says, like I said, try it if you can. Andreas says, if he relying on items, power, then. Andreas bring out Nickel and Timer. Even the dead bodies around him gets up. Andreas thinks, I'm going to use sheer numbers to overpower him. Hosen smiles and says, you really are an interesting one. To think I met a necromancer who uses a sword. Hosen brings out demon culling sword Ganos. Andreas is really surprised and thinks, an anti-undead sword? Hosen says, if I also took your corpse back with me, I'm sure the master jester would be pleased. Andreas thinks, how many swords are in that subspace sheath? Let's start with a war of attrition. Andreas asks them to attack. Hosen says, you think you can win? With that trash? Hosen uses a really powerful attack. Timer attacks him from the side. Hosen says, undead are easy enemies. Because they're dumb. Nickel also appears behind him. Nickel and Timer attack him at the same time. Hosen jumps and says, for a bunch of corpses, they sure can move. How about this? Andreas also brings out the giant. Hosen is really surprised. The 20th part of the necromancer's evolutionary traits ends here. If you want to see more, please subscribe and like. And if you want to support me financially, you can join my channel membership or Patreon only for $1. Patreon and Discord links are in the description if you want to support me. And a special thanks to all my Patreons for supporting me. Thanks for watching.